Imagine a threat that didn't come from tanks in the streets, but from whispers in the corridors of power, a silent coup orchestrated in the shadows. And at the center of this danger, an unexpected figure, known for her influence and an intriguing name, whose audacious plan aimed to bring down the leader through one final, desperate act. Stay with us to delve into the chilling details of how this conspiracy almost rewrote the destiny of a nation. Subscribe now to the channel to uncover more mysteries and understand the hidden forces that shape the world we know. On the stage of politics, where every movement is observed and every decision echoes, Ibrahim Traoré's rise to power brought with it a complex mix of renewed hope and gigantic challenges that hung over the nation's future like a heavy cloud. Creating an environment where stability was a precious commodity constantly threatened by internal and external forces seeking to influence the course of events according to their own particular interests, wishing to maintain a control they felt was slipping from their powerful and greedy hands. His leadership represented a significant change, promising a new direction and arousing nationalist fervor in many, but also generating silent and open resistance from those whose privileges or plans were disrupted by his arrival at the helm, forcing him to navigate a sea of dangerous and unpredictable political and social complexities, where every step could be a minefield of betrayals and latent discontents that were accumulating in the underground of power, unseen by the general public. The country faced multifaceted and persistent obstacles, from the daily struggle against groups sowing terror in various regions, destabilizing the lives of rural and urban communities and draining essential resources for development, to the economic pressures weighing on the population, with the cost of living on the rise and limited opportunities for the majority, and the delicate dance of international relations, where alliances and rivalries intertwined in an intricate web of geopolitical interests colliding over the national territory, testing the new government's capacity to balance urgent domestic needs with the complex demands of a volatile and challenging global scenario, requiring firm and insightful leadership to avoid being crushed by external forces operating with their own agendas. The task of governing in this context was immense, demanding not only strength and determination to confront the visible enemies attacking the country, but also sharp political acumen to identify and neutralize the more subtle threats that presented themselves in various forms, both visible and invisible. Testing the limits of national resilience and the ability to rapidly adapt to constantly changing circumstances and the persistent pressure exerted by different actors in the nation's complex political and economic landscape, making the path forward fraught with peril and requiring constant vigilance against unseen adversaries. However, the most insidious threat did not manifest through easily identifiable frontal attacks that mobilized the armed forces or massive street protests that captured the immediate attention of the public and international media, but rather through a more subtle and dangerous strategy that moved silently through the backstage of power and economic influence, infiltrating key institutions and weaving a hidden web of influence with the ultimate goal of destabilizing the government from within, undermining its support base and its ability to govern effectively, without the need for an open confrontation that could alert the population and the regime's supporters to the true nature of the imminent danger hanging over the nation's future, operating like a virus that attacked the vital organs of the state in a disguised and patient manner, taking advantage of existing systemic vulnerabilities to expand its reach and consolidate its position of power in a dissimulated and effective way. This was the harbinger of what would become known as a silent coup, an attempt to take control without the noise of conventional weapons or the commotion of popular revolutions, but with the calculated precision of political and economic manipulation in its purest and most dangerous form. Using influence and money as tools to erode the government's authority and legitimacy gradually and almost imperceptibly to most unsuspecting citizens and international observers, who could only see the surface of national problems without realizing the hidden forces actively working to exacerbate and exploit them for their own benefit. The idea of a silent coup is particularly disturbing because it operates in the shadows of power and influence, using economic leverage, political subversion, and the strategic dissemination of distorted information, known as fake news, to undermine confidence in institutions, the leader, and democratic processes, creating an environment of doubt, distrust, and division that weakens the government's support base and facilitates the seizure of power through non-democratic and illegitimate means, exploiting existing societal rifts to expand its reach and consolidate its position in a disguised and effective manner, often using intermediaries and seemingly legitimate fronts to mask their true intentions and origins. This type of threat is difficult to combat because it does not present a clearly defined enemy with whom one can fight openly on a traditional battlefield, requiring constant vigilance, a keen ability to discern the hidden maneuvers and disguised motivations driving the conspirators who operate beneath the surface of seemingly normal daily events. Challenging the capacity for rapid and coordinated reaction by security and intelligence authorities and civil society itself to protect itself and its fundamental democratic institutions against this insidious form of attack and political subversion that undermined national sovereignty from within. There were signs, for those who knew where to look and possessed the sensitivity to perceive them in the labyrinths of state bureaucracy and the financial landscape, that something nefarious was afoot in the underground of power, unusual financial movements escaping public scrutiny, evidencing suspicious money flows funding obscure activities. Sudden changes in strategic positions within the state bureaucracy placing individuals loyal to the network in key posts, carefully orchestrated. Defamation campaigns circulating on less regulated communication platforms, and the dissemination of rumors aimed at creating panic and distrust among different sectors of society, discrediting the government, and creating a climate of instability conducive to disorder, all elements that, together, painted a worrying picture of a conspiracy forming, moving with dark and destabilizing purposes, acting in a coordinated manner to achieve their goals of seizing power and controlling national resources for their own benefit, without regard for the welfare of the population. These were not isolated or random incidents, but rather pieces of a larger puzzle, carefully fitted together by minds aiming for a specific and dangerous objective, using a variety of disguised tactics to achieve their ends. Working methodically to weaken the regime before delivering the final and decisive blow that would allow them to take control of the country and impose their own political and economic agenda on the population, disregarding democratic principles or popular will. Ibrahim Traoré, amidst this complex tapestry of visible and invisible challenges and threats, was likely aware he faced significant opposition from elements discontent with his rise and his policies, but perhaps did not have the complete picture of the extent and insidious nature of the silent coup being plotted against him from within and outside the country. Focused on the more visible and immediate threats demanding his constant attention, such as combating terrorism and managing the economic and social crises afflicting the nation, without fully realizing that the most serious danger was hidden where least expected, within the very structures he led and that were supposed to serve the interests of the state and the population, a grim reminder that not everyone holding positions of trust or bearing respected titles is loyal to the national cause and the collective well-being of the nation. And that betrayal can come from the closest and most unexpected circles. The inherent fragility of his leadership position in a politically charged environment made him a constant target for those seeking to destabilize the country and seize power for their own gain, and the network planning his downfall exploited this vulnerability with cold precision, awaiting the opportune moment to execute the most critical phase of their audacious and dangerous plan aimed at reversing the course of history and national development, imposing their own dominion over the country's destiny and the future of its citizens and institutions. At the heart of this intricate web of manipulation and obscure planning, woven in the backstage of power and influence, emerged the figure of Madame Zhongli, a special advisor for international economic affairs, whose respected position within the governmental structure granted her privileged access to sensitive information and strategic power circles, making her an ideal piece on the chessboard of the silent coup being played against Ibrahim Traoré's government, demonstrating the network's sophistication and its ability to infiltrate its agents into positions of high relevance, using the facade of legitimacy and institutional access to advance its agenda of destabilization and power seizure in a disguised and effective manner, operating beneath the surface of diplomatic relations and international economic negotiations that seemed harmless to the eyes of the unsuspecting public. Her presence in the plot added a layer of international complexity and reach to the conspiracy, suggesting connections and interests extending beyond national borders, indicating that the silent coup attempt may have had significant external ramifications and support operating in conjunction with discontented internal elements hungry for power, seeking to influence the nation's political outcomes according to their own long-term strategic and commercial objectives, which could be different from, and even conflict with national interests and the general population's well-being. This enigmatic figure, Madame Zhongli, did not fit the stereotype of the militant or traditional political agitator operating on the fringes of society. She seemed to possess a different set of skills, perhaps a sharp analytical mind that allowed her to understand the complexities of the political and economic system, the ability to move unnoticed in high-level environments, mastery of infiltration and institutional subversion tactics, and a calculated coldness necessary to execute high-risk tasks without hesitation or remorse, qualities that made her an ideal agent for the most sensitive and dangerous parts of the silent coup plan, a precise and lethal tool in the hands of the masterminds who recruited and molded her to serve their dark and destructive purposes, transforming her into a fundamental piece in the strategy to overthrow the established regime and impose a new political and economic order that would benefit the network's interests and its hidden supporters, without regard for the human and social cost this would entail for the nation as a whole. Her position as special advisor gave her the perfect cover and necessary access to operate near the center of power, weaving her web of intrigue without raising excessive suspicion from security and other government members, using the trust inherent in her position to collect sensitive information, manipulate decisions, and prepare the ground for the final act of the ongoing conspiracy, revealing that the threat came not just from outside, but also from within the very corridors of power, where trust had been betrayed to serve obscure and destabilizing interests operating with impunity. Within the larger framework of the silent coup, the assassination of Ibrahim Traoré was the central and most critical piece, the trigger that would unleash the final phase of the operation, creating a sudden power vacuum and the necessary chaos for the conspirators to emerge from the shadows and take control, using the disorder and instability to justify their actions and consolidate their position before any significant opposition could be organized, turning the assassination attempt not just into an act of brutal individual political violence, but into an essential component of a carefully crafted and timed power seizure strategy designed to coincide with the moment of greatest vulnerability for the political and national security system, thus maximizing the chances of success for those involved in the conspiracy and minimizing the risks of failure in executing the master plan aimed at reversing the course of history and national development, imposing their own political and economic agenda for the country's future, regardless of the human and social cost it would entail. The elimination of the leader was seen as the checkmate in the game of power being played behind the scenes, the ultimate move that would incapacitate organized resistance and pave the way for the victory of the conspirators and their hidden supporters, ensuring the implementation of their own political and economic agenda for the country's future and the consolidation of their power and influence over national resources and the population in general, thus fulfilling the ultimate goals of the conspiracy. The assassination plan itself, devised by Madame Jeanli under the direction of the silent coup's masterminds, must have been meticulous and cruel in its conception, taking into account Traoré's security protocols, which were strict due to the various threats he faced, and seeking to identify the most opportune moment and location for an attack with a high probability of success, exploiting daily routines, momentary security lapses, or public events where access to the target was possible, even for a brief decisive instant, demonstrating sharp tactical understanding and a willingness to take calculated risks in the name of the cause they served, or the money and influence they sought to gain from the coup's success, acting with a coldness and precision that revealed her training and dedication to the hidden network's objectives. Every detail, from the choice of the most suitable weapon for the task, considering the circumstances of the location and time, to the escape route or camouflage strategy to avoid detection and capture after executing the act, was likely planned with surgical precision, reflecting the seriousness of the threat and the conspirators' relentless determination to achieve their objective at any cost, transforming an act of individual violence into a fundamental piece of a power seizure strategy, aimed at destabilizing the nation and imposing a new political and economic order, regardless of the human and social cost involved, demonstrating the cold and calculating nature of the conspiracy operating in the shadows. Thus, the figure of Madame Jeanli, the special advisor, and the assassination plan she orchestrated and sought to execute represented the visible tip of a much larger iceberg, the most brutal and direct manifestation of a silent coup moving beneath the surface of national political life, using institutional infiltration, economic manipulation, and political destabilization to achieve its objectives in a disguised manner, culminating in the attempt on the leader's life as the final and decisive step towards realizing their power seizure plans, a grim reminder that threats to a nation's security and stability can come from unexpected directions and with faces that do not fit traditional stereotypes, requiring constant vigilance and a deep understanding of the forces operating in the shadows to be effectively combated and neutralized before they can cause irreparable damage to the country's social, political, and economic fabric and compromise the future of the entire population. The revelation that a figure holding a position of trust and privileged access was involved in the assassination plan underscored the depth and insidiousness of the conspiracy that had infiltrated the state's structures, using trust and legitimacy as tools to subvert the constitutional order and impose a new political reality on the nation. The day of the assassination attempt dawned with an apparent normality for most of the population and those not in the inner circles of power, the kind of daily routine that lulls nations into a false sense of security before catastrophic events erupt without warning. But beneath this calm surface, the subterranean tension of the conspiracy reached its peak. With each piece of the attack plan moving into its designated position and Madame Zhongli, the special advisor, preparing to execute the high-risk task entrusted to her by the silent coup's masterminds, a moment of high suspense where the nation's destiny hung by an invisible thread, depending on the perfect execution of a deadly plan conceived in the shadows of deceit, boundless ambition, and institutional betrayal, with the special advisor representing the executing arm of a strategy carefully planned to destabilize the country from within. The location chosen for the attack, perhaps a high-security public event, an official meeting, or a known route frequented by the leader, provided the crucial opportunity for a quick and unexpected attack, exploiting a momentary security breach that, for the conspirators, represented the best chance of success against a heavily guarded and constantly vigilant target, turning a common space into a potential stage for tragedy and abrupt, violent political change, rewriting the nation's future. With an act of political brutality, the execution of the plan was launched, an instant of rapid and desperate action where Madame Zhongli, driven by ideological programming, promises of reward, or fear of failing, sought to deliver the fatal blow, moving with a cold precision and a determination focused on the sole objective of eliminating the leader and paving the way for the silent coup unfolding in the backstage of power and influence. A breathtaking moment where Traoré's life and the country's future were at stake, depending on fractions of a second and the immediate reaction of those around who could perceive the imminent danger and act quickly to neutralize it before it was too late to reverse the course of events that were rushing towards a potentially catastrophic outcome for the entire nation and its position in the regional and international geopolitical scenario. With the special advisor acting as the final executor of a conspiracy aimed at undermining national sovereignty. However, and to the relief of many, the plan failed in its final, sinister objective. Whether due to the superior effectiveness of the security on site, a minimal error in execution caused by the pressure of the moment, an advance warning that allowed for a quick and coordinated reaction by the protection team, or simply by sheer luck intervening at the decisive moment, the assassination attempt was thwarted, resulting in the immediate containment of the assailant before she could inflict fatal harm on her target, turning the planned act of brutal violence into a moment of controlled shock and disorder that, paradoxically, exposed the conspiracy instead of ensuring its success and the seizure of power by the plotters, revealing the face of betrayal that was hidden in the corridors of power. The sound of the alarm, the rush of the security detail, and the immobilization of Madame Zhongli marked the turning point of the crisis, the instant when the darkness of the conspiracy operating in the shadows was forced to face the light of public exposure, and the relentless investigation that would follow. Seeking to unravel the complete network behind the assassination attempt and the silent coup being plotted in the backstage of national and international political power, with the special advisor as the key piece to unraveling the entire complex plot. Ibrahim Traoré, having narrowly escaped certain death in a moment of extreme danger, reacted with the calm and determination that marked his leadership, turning the shock of the moment into a crucial opportunity to reaffirm his position and launch a decisive and relentless response against those who dared to attempt his life and, more importantly, against the stability and sovereignty of the nation he led. Immediately understanding that the assassination attempt by Madame Zhongli was not an isolated act of political violence, but rather the brutal and planned manifestation of a larger conspiracy seeking to destabilize the country and seize power through illegitimate and anti-democratic means, using brute force as a last resort in its power seizure strategy. His survival was not just a relief for his supporters. It was a powerful catalyst for rapid and coordinated action against the network operating in the shadows and that had infiltrated the structures of the state. Using the moment of crisis to mobilize security and intelligence forces in a relentless hunt for the masterminds and supporters of the silent coup that had been dramatically and unquestionably exposed by the frustrated assassination attempt in broad daylight, revealing the depth of the betrayal and the magnitude of the threat hanging over the country. The capture of Madame Zhongli was the first crucial link in the chain of events that began to unravel the complex and dangerous plot of the silent coup, as the investigation into her identity, her position as special advisor, her connections, and her motivations quickly pointed to the existence of a broader and more organized network behind her, revealing that she was not a lone operative or an isolated fanatic, but rather a carefully positioned and utilized piece in a much larger game of power and influence, whose players operated at higher levels and with significant resources that allowed them to weave a web of manipulation and control over key aspects of national life, using her as a disposable tool to execute the most dangerous and critical phase of their power seizure strategy, demonstrating the sophistication and depth of the infiltration into the governmental system. The questions that arose from her capture, such as who recruited her, who financed her, and what the ultimate goals of the network she served were the essential starting point for an investigation that delved into the depths of the conspiracy, seeking to identify the financiers, planners, and facilitators who operated in the shadows and had orchestrated the silent coup with the intention of subverting the constitutional order and taking control of the country, using political violence as a means to achieve their destabilizing objectives. The initial investigation focused on Madame Zhongli, the captured special advisor, quickly expanded to encompass the complex network that employed her and placed her in a position of trust within the government, revealing the first threads that linked the assassination attempt to a much more sophisticated and comprehensive plot seeking to seize power gradually, and in a disguised manner, exposing the true nature of the silent coup unfolding behind the ordinary and seemingly normal events of national political life, demonstrating that the threat to stability and security came not only from known external enemies or traditional insurgent groups, but also, and equally dangerously, from internal and external elements who, driven by ambition, ideology, or illicit, often foreign interests, were willing to subvert the democratic order and use political violence and institutional manipulation to achieve their own ends, regardless of the human and social cost this would entail for the population and the future of the nation as a whole, forcing authorities to confront a dark and dangerous reality that had operated in the shadows for a long time and now needed to be dismantled urgently to ensure the regime's survival and lasting social peace. With the assassination attempt by Madame Zhongli and the figure of the special advisor exposing the plot of the silent coup that had infiltrated the heart of the government, Ibrahim Traoré took the lead in responding to the crisis, mobilizing state resources and the strength of institutions to completely unravel and neutralize the conspiracy that almost cost his life and the nation's stability, demonstrating unwavering determination in the face of danger and a leadership capacity that strengthened in the direct confrontation with the hidden threat, using the moment of crisis to unify security and intelligence forces in a relentless hunt for the conspirators operating in the backstage of power and influence, seeking to ensure that the conspiracy was completely dismantled, that those responsible for orchestrating and financing the silent coup were brought to justice to answer for their actions and the attempt to subvert the country's constitutional order, using the moment of vulnerability to reaffirm the state's authority, strengthen its institutions, and secure his own legitimacy as a national leader, demonstrating to the country and the world that national sovereignty and stability would not be easily undermined by hidden forces and illicit interests. The hunt for those involved in the silent coup and the assassination attempt was an arduous and delicate task, as the network had infiltrated various layers of society, the economy, and the government itself, and its members operated with discretion and used hidden, often international, communication and funding channels that made it difficult for authorities to track and identify them. Requiring a combination of sophisticated intelligence, detailed financial investigations following the money trail that funded the conspiracy, and coordinated security actions to map the organization's structure and arrest its main leaders and supporters without causing widespread panic among the population or compromising the integrity of ongoing investigations that were revealing the full extent of the conspiracy that had operated in the shadows for a long period of time, undermining the foundations of the state and democracy. The network, accustomed to operating in the depths of clandestinity and disguised influence, attempted to adapt to the exposure caused by the capture of Madame Zhongli and the failure of the assassination attempt, but the combined pressure of the governmental investigation and the government's decisive response hampered their movements, limited their ability to reorganize and continue operating with impunity in the national political landscape, dealing a significant blow to their clandestine operations. The methods used by the silent coup to achieve its objectives were varied and insidious, extending far beyond the direct violence manifested in the assassination attempt, including the corruption of public officials in strategic positions to obtain privileged information and sabotage government policies that did not serve the network's interests. The manipulation of public opinion through control or influence over media outlets and social media platforms to disseminate disinformation, create social divisions, and undermine confidence in the government and democratic institutions, and the use of economic and financial influence to pressure political decision-makers, create dependencies, and divert resources that serve the interests of the conspirators and their hidden supporters, using the power of money and international connections to subvert internal order. All elements of a multifaceted and comprehensive strategy aimed at weakening the state from within before delivering the final blow and seizing control of power and national resources. It was a war fought not with conventional weapons in the streets or on battlefronts, but with the manipulation of minds, the subversion of institutions, and the exploitation of vulnerabilities in the political, economic, and social system. A threat that required an equally sophisticated and multifaceted response to be effectively combated and neutralized in all its various disguised and dangerous manifestations, protecting the nation against this insidious form of attack on its sovereignty. The exposure of Madame Zhongli and the assassination attempt she carried out served as the necessary catalyst for authorities to dismantle a large part of the silent coup network, as the urgency imposed by the attempt on the leader's life legitimized decisive action and allowed resources and efforts to be concentrated on hunting the conspirators operating behind the scenes and using their influence to undermine the state, resulting in a series of high-profile arrests, the discovery of future plans revealing the extent of the conspiracy, and the blocking of funding sources, often international, that significantly weakened the network's ability to continue operating in secrecy and pose an immediate threat to national security and the stability of the established government, demonstrating that, even in the most elaborate and infiltrated conspiracies, a single error or unexpected failure can be enough to bring the entire plot to light and allow law enforcement forces to act to protect the state and the population from the dangers lurking in the shadows of power and hidden influence, with the capture of the special advisor revealing the depth of betrayal and the magnitude of the internal and external threat hanging over the country. The overcoming of the silent coup, precipitated by the assassination attempt on Ibrahim Traoré by Madame Zhongli, the special advisor, was a demonstration of the resilience of the leader and the state institutions that, despite the infiltrations, exposed vulnerabilities, and betrayal from within, managed to unite and respond effectively to an existential threat seeking to subvert the constitutional order and seize power through illegitimate and violent means, avoiding a scenario of chaos and prolonged instability that the conspirators aimed for to impose their own order and take control of the nation, using the crisis as an opportunity to cleanse internal structures of subversive elements and strengthen the security and intelligence mechanisms essential to protect the country against future attempts of destabilization and subversion of the constitutional order by hidden forces, both internal and external, operating in the backstage of power and influence, seeking to undermine national sovereignty for their own benefit. The story of the assassination attempt and the exposed silent coup, with the central figure of Madame Zhongli, the special advisor, serves as a dark and poignant cautionary tale about the dangers lurking beneath the surface of political life and international relations, reminding us that threats to democracy, stability, and national sovereignty can come from unexpected sources, infiltrate the most trusted structures, and operate in disguised and dangerous ways, using manipulation, influence, corruption, and conspiracy to achieve their objectives without resorting to open brute force, highlighting the constant need for keen vigilance on the part of citizens and institutions, and the crucial importance of protecting the integrity of state structures against the infiltration of illicit interests, destabilizing agendas, often funded and directed by external forces, seeking to undermine national sovereignty and popular will expressed through democratic processes, and which can lead to political violence and the loss of human lives in their relentless pursuit of power and control over the nation's destiny, using figures of trust as tools to achieve their nefarious objectives. The exposure of this dark plot shows us that the true battle for a nation's stability often happens far from the public eye, in the hidden corridors of power and influence. If this story resonated with you and made you think about the invisible forces at play, please support our work. Subscribe to the channel to continue exploring these complex and important narratives. Leave a like on this video to help spread this awareness, and share your comments and questions below. Your participation helps us bring more relevant stories into the light. Thank you very much for being with us.